What is up, guys? I have missed you very, very, very much. I've been very busy with school, very busy with just fatherly duties, and I have missed you. I have not fallen off yet. We'll fall off when I hit 250 subscribers, not yet. We're going to continue our imperfect attempt at an integral morality. I say let's just jump right into it, right? We're going to talk about Jonathan Haidt. We're going to talk about a specific example, and then we're going to kind of try to wrap it all up. So let's talk about Jonathan Haidt. Who's Jonathan Haidt? Jonathan Haidt is a moral psychologist rather than a moral philosopher. So rather than figuring out moral shoulds, he's figuring out moral do's, which is to say, rather than focus on prescriptive morality, he's focusing on descriptive morality. And he made a great discovery, and I think he made an integral aperspectival discovery. And that discovery was that, quote unquote, underneath, below our conscious mental actions in terms of morality, I choose to take this from you, I choose to give it to you, is this moral root that essentially acts as an intuition that automatically compels moral action through activating the automatic faculties, so emotions, instincts, and these compel action without thinking. If you have a moral intuition or moral root that drives automatically your conscious actions, that sounds like Jean Gebser's magical consciousness structure. So the moral root is the emphasis on the magical structure. Great. Where's the mythical structure? So Haidt has this idea that we have moral intuitions. And let's take care, for example. So we have a moral intuition to care for people. Great. What Haidt also discovered is that the care cannot come without its necessary counterpole, harm. So rather than just moral intuition to care, we also have its complement, harm. That sounds like polarity to me, which is the mythical structure. So Haidt is saying, in addition to our conscious, rational, egoistic actions in relation to morality, we have these other aspects of the human condition. One of them is automatic and instinctual. The other one is narratival and focuses in terms of emotions and pairs or polarities. This is why I believe Jonathan Haidt has made an integral discovery here. And I think it's great, and I think it speaks to why he's so popular, though I will say he deludes himself into thinking he's not biased. So the moral intuitions are care, harm, fairness, cheating, loyalty, betrayal, authority, subversion, sanctity, degradation, and liberty, oppression. Different people, whether it be individuals or collectives, differ in the degree of ratio, or they differ in the ratios of what they care about. So the left, in my opinion, I think Haidt makes this point too. Pretty much all of this has been zoomed for the left into care, harm. They almost don't care about anything else. They don't care if you're expressing your freedom, your First Amendment freedom. If you're doing it to hurt people's feelings, we're going to take that way and we're going to institute safe spaces. Everything gets subsumed into care, harm. It is a very feminine way of acting with morality, to the point where sometimes we can't even put prisoners in prison because that's a harmful experience. No shit. Duh. Whereas the right, they're a little more diverse, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're better. They care more about fairness, cheating, loyalty, betrayal, authority, subversion, sanctity, degradation. Those are very important to the right. Whereas the libertarians, they do what the left does, but they go in a different direction. They really only care about liberty and oppression. All we get is liberty. They couldn't care less. That's why we get this open border nonsense. So that's why people disagree. It's not just because, like I thought when I was 16, that everyone's an idiot and I'm just a genius. So let's use an example that we're going to go through. The whole point of this is it's supposed to be controversial. Without the controversy, there is no efficaciousness to this video. But don't worry. So this isn't going to turn into a partisan screed. So the example we're going to use is letting a murderer go with a reduced sentence based on past collective trauma or considerations of their socioeconomic conditions. For our example, let's use a fictional example. So let's take Marlo Stanfield. If you ever watch The Wire, he is a complete psychopath, a complete psychopath. He will murder you just for looking at him the wrong way, and he has murdered you for just looking at him the wrong way. So let's say Marlo Stanfield murders this innocent man, William Gant. And William Gant is just a mailman. He's a law-abiding, tax-paying citizen. He might not be a perfect person, but he is innocent in this case. Now, in our example, the judge, who is probably on the left, is going to say, Marlo, it is not your fault that you murdered this person because you were born into circumstances that compelled you or shaped your desire to murder people, and really we should arrest poverty and racism and all that stuff, so we're going to let you go. So we're going to appeal to past collective injustices or your current socioeconomic conditions to let it go. Okay, so let's see how the magical structure fits this. So the magical structure is relatively amoral, of course. There's little to say except that a situation like this, when you let a murderer go back on the streets, is going to activate our pre-rational faculties, emotion, instincts, which of course prevent us from thinking rationally. You don't want that. You always have to be on guard of that. And another element of the magic structure is equity. All false equating derives from the magical structure, the deficient aspects of the structure. And equity is nothing if not a false equating. There has never been equality of outcomes between nations, states, counties, neighborhoods, or even same households. You're not going to find perfect parity in terms of political, socioeconomic, or just any other status. It's just not going to happen. It doesn't happen in the same household. It's a false equating. So a lot of what's driving these judges to do that is this idea of equity. We are going to equalize past disparities through present legislation. And remember, the magic structure, I covered the false ones. Now we got to talk about the mythical structure. So the mythical structure is very big. It's very big on the left. We're going to talk about the differences. I think talking how an efficiently rational versus an efficiently mythical person would perceive cosmic forces, I think that'll really delineate the two. And then we're going to talk about how these cosmic forces are related to, because that's huge. So, of course, if you follow my Gebser series, you know that mythical consciousness discloses being through polarities. So we don't have this one or the other antithetical framing. If there's a truth of the external world, then it must correspond to the truth of the internal world. And myths arise after identifying correspondences between truths of the external world and truths of myths identify, myths arise after identifying truths of the cyclical development and nature of the external world and the cyclical development or nature of the internal soul processes. So let's say I have my little house on the prairie and I have a son and a daughter. My daughter's in the mythical structure, my son is in the mental structure. I tell them, walk out and tell me what you see. So they run out the house and they say, Dad, all I see is empty farmland that is barren and there are vultures eating a rat over there and there's no crops and we're all going to die. So both of these people would, at least to an extent, believe that the current lack of crop production has been shaped by cosmic forces. Now, let's stick with the mental because I think that'll be easier to start with. You and I were efficiently rational people. What we would say is that, yes, cosmic forces shaped crops to either grow or die for a particular reason. It's just we would view the cosmic forces that shape the world as the laws of science. So something as simple as I have my book from Adam's Guide to Integral Theory, the one I talk to all the time on this channel. Shout out to Adam. If I let go of the book, right, it drops. So the cosmic force, if you will, that is the law of gravity, shapes the world. Great. The mythical structure, my daughter in this example, would not see it that way. Of course, the crops in this case would either grow or die in accordance with Demeter's wishes. So the cosmic force is a god who has this sort of divine magical power rather than science. So that fundamentally is a difference in how these two view cosmic forces that shape the world. One is rational, scientifically focused. One is mythical and God-centric. There you go. Okay, now where do I want to go next? Okay, so now we should talk about how we relate to this. Now let's stick with the mythical because I think it'll be easier. Remember, mythical consciousness views everything in terms of polarities and it sees everything in terms of polarities. So when the daughter in this example walks out and they see the barren crops, all they're going to view this as being part of this great cyclical turning. First we are at the barren pole, then we get to the vital pole. First we're at the decay, then we're at the renewal. Now we're at decay, then the renewal. So we've identified a cyclical movement of the external world in mythical consciousness. In times of winter, this is very, 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 very important. In times of winter, the world feels barren or dead externally because of the lack of crops. That will inevitably cycle into summertime and where the world feels lively and vital and fructifying and all this great stuff. So again, emphasis on the 2D polar cycle. Now, why specifically is it that Demeter is grieving the kidnapping of her child Persephone? I'm going to tell you why. Because everything is understood through correspondences. So, if the world feels barren or dead externally in times of winter, that truth of the external world must necessarily correspond to a truth of the internal soul. So the question then becomes, living through time, are there any instances where the world feels barren or dead within? The answer is yes, and that, of course, is in moments of grief. So we already have a correspondence. We have the barrenness induced by external winter, right, corresponds to the barrenness induced by grief, because there is not an antithetical framing that the rationalists would have and say, well, that might be true of your inner soul, but that doesn't necessarily correspond to the movements of the external world. What is true for the internal soul must necessarily be true for the external world. So if barrenness, which I feel in my soul, which also corresponds to the external world in times of winter, is induced by grief internally in my soul, then barrenness must necessarily be induced by grief externally. Thus, the real quote-unquote cause of the lack of crops is not science, it is Demeter literally grieving Persephone. Demeter grieving Persephone is what causes the crops to not grow or to decay. It has nothing to do with science, and it always emerges after identifying correspondences between cyclical developments of the external world with cyclical developments of the internal soul or soul processes. Okay, in this instance, and I apologize for being a little repetitive, but I want to get this in your head. In this instance, it would be the idea that the external barrenness corresponds to the internal barrenness in times of grief. Now that I know that barrenness is induced by grief, it must necessarily be true in the external world. Therefore, Demeter is literally grieving, which is causing it. So the idea with mythical consciousness is that the world is shaped by cosmic forces that are above and beyond the individual, and that these cosmic forces are generally thought of to be as gods that correspond to the internal soul, as opposed to someone like you and I, who's an efficiently rational person, who would say, well, it might be true that my soul cycles between, death and life, but the external world might have something else. I have, because I have an ego and I have a mental way of doing things and I have mastered space, I have a higher degree of freedom and free will from nature, whereas the people in the mythical structure, they're essentially determined by this cyclical outlook. So that's a big difference in how these two groups see the world and how they relate to the world based on that perception. So now let's bring this back to the left in this example. So in the same way that my daughter in the last example, seeing the barren field, seeing the dead crops, would view that as literally the cosmic force or deity of Demeter grieving, or cosmic force shaping the world, in the same way, the left believes that the world and history that has unfolded over time has been shaped by two cosmic forces that allow the world to exist as it does today. There's oppressor and there's oppressed. There's justice and injustice. These are the two forces that shape the world. And according to the left, when you have things like war, slavery, colonialism, Jim Crow, redlining, and all those other things, it's not necessarily that these are moral failings or these are products of moral failings of the individual in question. No. The individual was a mere puppet to sing through, for cosmic forces to sing through and control. So it's not that, or at least it's not entirely, let's say there's a slave owner and a slave. It's not even entirely that the slave owner is a moral failure, even though I would say he is, and the left would probably agree with that as well. It is that the cosmic force of oppression, which is essentially invisible, has shaped and determined the slave owner to act as he does. So in the same way that mythical consciousness, before we have the strong ego and the strong sense of self, the strong sense of I, we viewed humans, including ourselves, as instruments for God to quote-unquote sing through, that is, master control and puppet. This is why in mythical accounts, back in the day, if you had an invading tribe coming after you and killing you, they would say that the invading tribe aren't acting on their own free will. Really, it's Ares, the god of wrath, has poured sustenance into the invaders and therefore has compelled them to kill us. It's the same thing here. It's not that Justin is oppressive because of his own personal failings. It's Justin is oppressive because the cosmic force of oppression has shaped him to adapt himself to capitalism and all these oppressive structures. So when he goes to the gas station and picks up a Snickers bar, That's actually oppressive, but he doesn't see it. So in the same way that the invaders were just instruments for the gods to sing through, I am an instrument for the cosmic forces of oppression to sing through. So, of course, if a member of the oppressed and applied to American political life, that would be African Americans, which would be Marlowe Stanfield, he would be a member of the cosmic oppressed. So, throwing him in jail for a murder that he was compelled to commit based on a cosmic force would be an injustice. It would be an injustice. So, therefore, we must, as leftists, turn the wheel and let Marlowe go, so we can have no longer the cosmic force of oppressor, but the cosmic force of oppressed be active. So the left, when they see Marlowe Stanfield being let go, they do not view it as a murderer with incredible moral and spiritual failings being let free to run amok on the city. They view it as a cosmic turning of the wheel, a cosmic fight against the force of oppression. So that, my friend, is how the social justice left, the woke left, the far left, whatever you want to call it, that's how they view the world. And because, hold on. Now, if you remember, the symbol for mythical consciousness is a terrible circle. As I mentioned, is a 2D flat circle. Emphasis on the word flat. So if you think that Justin going to the gas station to get a Reese's is oppressive because I'm reinforcing oppressive capitalism and blah, 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 if you think that's a little bit of a flat and reductive worldview, I would agree. Any sort of rational depth that says, well, hold on a second. The idea that you would rationally equate me going to the gas station and Jews being shoved into a oven is absurd. Well, the world gets flattened into a 2D circle, so you're either oppressed or you're not. In many ways, the cosmic forces of oppress and oppression supplant the traditional mythical poles of good and evil. Okay. So I think this is why, by the way, you have like good-natured soccer moms, and Lord knows I know them. I grew up with them my whole life. Since genuinely expressing more sympathy for the murderer rather than murdered. They've got it into their head. They flatten the world so that only these groups are oppressive and oppressed, and everything else is interpreted through that 2D lens. So justice is determined less by traditional rational means, so laws, rights, processes, but more where the victim or victimizer falls on the poles of oppressor/oppressed or justice/injustice. So now let's move on to the right. The right does not believe in the left's myth, and so they do not see everything, I was going to say in black and white terms. They still kind of do because they're still rationalists. They don't quite believe this idea of cosmic forces of oppression shaping the world. I think if you ask like a true believer, I think they would say yes, literally, that's shaping. In the same way, like I mentioned earlier, that gravity makes my book fall. I think they would say yes. The right doesn't quite believe that. Having said that, they value order in terms of the moral foundations that we talked about so much and to such a high degree that in effect it might as well just be you might as well just be committing to this idea of the cosmic force of order or any of that stuff. It should come as no surprise then that conservative judges, conservative lawmakers, they will make pretty sometimes draconian laws that totally remove the freedoms of individuals in a totally unnecessary way because they establish order. Think back in the day with women. You had to be essentially traded away for a dowry. The idea that a woman who the right claims to love so much would, I don't know, allow her soul to make the most important decision perhaps in her entire life, who she's going to marry. We can't have that because that engenders chaos, I guess, and it doesn't help create order. So we're going to completely incarcerate women's soul just for the sake of order. This is what I mean when I said, in effect, you might as well believe in the cosmic force of order because you might as well. Now, in fairness to the right, some of these removals of freedom, are reasonable, right? Like take Marlowe Stanfield, not to give my opinion away here. Yeah, we're going to remove your freedom for murdering people. It's really that, and we're going to do it for order too. In addition to any sort of moral consideration, we're also going to do it just to have order. Innocent, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens, they need to have the space and the order so they can live a high-quality life. You are a murderer, so we don't care what you think. So, but like I mentioned earlier with the dowries, some are not. Even more contemporary examples after 9/11, of course. What did we get? We got a complete destruction of our freedoms with the Patriot Act. Why did they do this, of course? Order and safety, what the right loves to talk about over and over and over again. We got it, buddy. A lot of these examples on the right happened in the past, but as Gebser Gebsarians, we know that the past shapes the present. So if nothing else, you can't say it was only the left that's doing this. It's not. If you want to say there's a difference in quality, and okay, but nonetheless, there is some similarities. So in fully mythic fashion, this simple trial is really a sign or symbol revealing a deeper cosmic force, narrative, or development. That is mythical consciousness right here, whether it's mental or mythical. The surface level event of Marlowe killing someone, really, that's just a sign of something deeper going on. In the same way, for example, remember that Sydney Sweeney Good Genes ad? The fact that caused such a stir, that's another example of mythical consciousness in action. There's no reason why, on the surface level, we should all be arguing about a pretty girl being thrown on a billboard. That's not a... How is that disagreeable? What they're arguing about is they believe that billboard is only the surface level, and underneath that, there is a development happening. The left would say a return of anti-woke policies, and the right would say a return of an anti-woke culture. And depending on what you think of that, that determines your reaction to that advertisement. So in the same way that Sydney Sweeney was just surface level for a deeper narrative, there you go. So that's how the mythical structure affects our little example here and morality. Now, unfortunately, the mythical structure shapes the way we engage with the mental structure. So now we're moving on to the mental structure. We'll start with the left. So seeing as America was built heavily upon rationality, and everything Western and rational has been associated with the oppressor pole. Remember, everything is flattened into oppressor or oppressed, all right? It's very reductive. So America, who has conferred the highest degree of freedom than any other Homo sapiens tribe ever, has been reduced to oppressive. Thank you, postmodernism. Postmodernism is essentially an intellectualized version of the mythical consciousness world that I was talking about. They also divide everything into oppressor and oppressed. So because everything American and everything rational has been associated with the oppressor pole, which is to say because aspects of the mental structure are being shaped by the mythical structure, therefore the left will gladly tear down things that are so important to it. So rights, due process, laws, voting, stuff like that. They could not care less, and they will destroy it. They always talk about packing the court. They mock your Bill of Rights and all that stuff. They think the Constitution is just like racist. I mean, you just ask them, and they'll tell you, unless they're being subversive, which they always are. So the mythical structure is shaping our engagement with the mental structure insofar as everything mental has been rendered oppressive, so it's got to go. Obviously, if you do this, you are going to forego the benefits of efficient rationality, and you are necessarily going to go back into the deficient aspects of the magical mythical structure. So it's not a good, not a good way of doing things. Okay, so that's how the left engages with. Now, of course, with the right, you have the opposite. The right is essentially built from the mental structure. And their myths are not by any means that rationality in America are oppressive. Their myths are actually rationality in America are not only the best thing out there, but they also help confer and establish order. So accordingly, the right's engagement with aspects of the mental structure are going to be diametrically opposed. So where the left goes to attack due process and rights and all that good stuff, on the accusation that they're oppressive, the right will defend that, hopefully at least, under the logic of they help confer order, they help make America exceptional, and all that stuff. So the different myths we're telling each other and viewing things from different consciousness structures shapes the deep divisions between these groups. So the right's always going on about the importance of order and due process and the law. I mean, these guys always go on about it. All right, so those were the structures, really, in our example. I'm not really going to be offering a definitive answer to this because I think that's not the point of this. The integral way forward with this example, right, is to simply ask yourself when acting, how are all these structures affecting each other and affecting me? Are we breaking with precedent? That would be an emphasis on the mental structure. Why are we breaking with precedent? How is the past affecting our present actions? So this would be the left, right? How are past injustices shaping your desire? I think Ibram X. Kendi said this. The only remedy to past discrimination is future discrimination. The only remedy to future discrimination is present discrimination. Hello, time anxiety, if I've ever heard it. How are the past shaping the present, and how are the myths we tell about the past shaping our present? How does that work? Is there perhaps a better way of addressing past sins than releasing psychopathic murderers into the street to terrorize innocent people? That would be my guess. Should we address particular systems or laws instead? Should we not address the laws at all? Should we focus on the myth? Not only did we mention how the myth shapes the engagement with the mental earlier, but take another example. Take the idea that we all are equal in terms of rights under the Constitution or Bill of Rights. That is directly downstream from the myth you tell each other, or we tell each other, that we are all equal under the eyes of God. You would not have equal rights under the law without equal status under God. So myth is shaping mental, and mental can shape myth. So that is the integral way forward. How are these aspects integrating or disintegrating and affecting each other? Let me know what you guys think. I have missed you guys so much. You are the best, and this will probably be the last video in this little mini-series for the time being. Maybe if I come up with some new things, we'll do a part 3. But I love you guys. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you soon.